When you look at how children develop their thinking about their own inner world, it's very fascinating to observe a certain sequence. So they seem to start out with the physical world, getting a grasp on how physical reality works. They develop concepts about the physical reality, and then only afterward do they develop concepts for their own inner world and their first person experience. So, in a sense, the third person reality comes first, and the first person, or how you experience the world, talking about that, conceptualizing that, thinking about that, comes always second. And that's also something that's mirrored in languages. In German, for example, many of the words that we use to describe interiority or first person phenomena, mental phenomena, are immediately derived from words that we use to describe the physical world. For example, begreifen, to understand something. Even in English, the word understand has the word stand in it. In German, greifen means as much as to grab hold onto something. So you can metaphorically think of understanding as taking hold of something. Or überlegen, to think or ponder something. Ponder about something in German is to lay something over something else. Legen is to lay something somewhere, put something somewhere. So it's like layering on top of each other. Or the German word for judgment is urteilen, to distinguish, to separate into pieces. Many of those concepts are just immediately and obviously derived from concepts about the physical world. And it's not only just linguistic, it's not just using words in the right way, but even conceptual. In other words, the metaphors themselves, or the schemas, the thought patterns themselves that we use to take hold of psychological reality or first person reality themselves are derived from the concepts that we use to describe the physical world. Mark Johnson uses the example that from a certain age on, children suddenly understand that when the key is in my hand and my hand is in my pocket, then also my key is in my pocket. This is the concept of composition. And obviously it's not just a physical concept, it's not just one object being within another object and therefore moving wherever this object goes. This is at the heart of logic. Composition, where one concept is part of another concept, is at the heart of how we think about reality in general. And that's the point that Mark Johnson and George Lakoff have been making, is that the heart of how we think, even the most abstract notions, like for example identity, what is it for something to be identical with itself? Does it mean to have a boundary or to be distinguished from the external world, something that it is not? Even those concepts are at the end of the day derived from very embodied experiences that every child can understand. And the thing is that if the child doesn't get it, if it doesn't get the notion of composition, there's just nothing you can do. There is no way of explaining it to a child if it doesn't go naturally, if you want, through this developmental sequence. If it doesn't learn it by itself, it doesn't grasp it by itself, by observation, by being embedded in reality, there are certain things you can never teach to a child. It will never be able to understand them. And the sequence in development, which indicates that first you grasp physical reality, and only then do you use metaphors from the physical reality to understand psychological reality, also means that you never have precision when you talk about psychological phenomena, because they're not physical. I mean, some people even argue that even the physical world, with the concepts that we use, are not precisely graspable. But this becomes even much more evident when we think about psychology, because in the psychological realm, there are no things which are just simple things, which have a clear boundary and are separable from other things, where you could point to something and say, this is a specific thought, and it's separated from a different thought. And thoughts don't have other properties, which are usually very clear cut, like they don't have a weight, they don't have a clear shape. They rather have other properties, like a thought can be confused, a thought can be valid or invalid. So it gets really, really tricky when we're trying to think about our own subjectivity. I think it's very, very difficult to actually come up with solid theories and solid ways of understanding our very own subjectivity. Most of it is just very murky, and this is what I believe we can see when you look at the humanities, which deal with the human realm or human psychology. You can have many, many different interpretations of the same phenomenon, and it seems all of them are kind of valid because all of them are just partially valid. All of them make sense only within one context of thinking, but not necessarily within another. And having this in mind, that we cannot really think in precise terms about psychology, that our thought about psychology is derived from physical reality and grasping physical reality, I think it becomes very, very interesting to then look at, for example, Holy Scriptures and ask the question, well, wait a minute, when back in the day, the language that was used was not really distinguishing between first person and third person. The terms that I just gave as examples in German, those inner psychological terms, including the notion of a psyche, of a consciousness, even the notion consciousness, are pretty recent terms. They're like a few hundred years old sometimes. And it doesn't mean that people couldn't think the concept many, many hundred years or even thousands of years earlier, but it simply means that the common language was not rich enough for everybody to understand, for example, the distinction between a ghost and the spirit. This is a distinction that is not immediately obvious to everybody, particularly if you don't have the distinction in the language itself. For example, German doesn't even make the distinction between a ghost and a spirit. One thing being a first-person phenomenon, and the other thing being a third-person phenomenon. So again, with this in mind, that there is a developmental sequence that we can't really think precisely about subjectivity, and children start out by acting out their subjectivity, not by grasping their own subjectivity. They project their subjectivity into the world and see it as the world, in a sense, but they don't really think or ponder about it, nor about the subjectivity of others. Having that in mind, it becomes extremely interesting when you look at sacred scriptures to ask the question, well, what does it actually mean? When at the time when those scriptures were written, the distinction between first person and third person didn't even exist in the first place.